Everyone, my name's Saeed Gordon with DOF Creations. We've begun a recording. This is going to be our first of most likely two sessions regarding the FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program. This session is going to go over what we know as of today. There's still some updates and some decisions being made regarding how certain processes are going to work, as well as certain documents, new forms like the Form 484 that we're going to be covering today. There are going to be additional trainings and materials that will come out from the FCC. So as those different materials come out, we'll of course make sure that we have additional sessions to go through what those changes or implications may have, or what those changes might have or create as far as new implications for you as future applicants, whether those are schools or libraries. So as we jump into this, if there are any questions, please make sure to include those in the chat and we'll go through them as they come in. But we'll also make sure if there are things that we don't have answers for yet, that we'll hold on to those questions and prepare for that as we go into our future sessions. So the FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program is for schools and libraries, specifically covering cybersecurity resources that have traditionally been excluded from the E-rate program. Of course, E-rate covers network connectivity and cybersecurity essentials. From Cat 1, you would look at web content filtering, and in Cat 2, your firewall resources. That is pretty much the extent of cybersecurity or any type of security monitoring and support that's included in the E-rate program traditionally. This FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program specifically looks at trying to determine what types of cybersecurity solutions either should be added to E-rate support in the future, or if this will be a standalone program, how will this standalone program operate after this 3-year pilot program concludes? So for today, we're going to have a pretty tight agenda. What is this program, which we've already started to go into a bit? What are the priorities? What's eligible? Who's eligible? And what are some of the things that we know as of today to help applicants to get prepared? So the FCC cybersecurity program is a 3-year pilot program. It's going to be a lottery program, so not all those that apply will be awarded funding. It's going to be $200 million to cover the whole country. So of course, we anticipate that not everybody that applies will receive a nomination or award in regard to a funding allocation for their particular solution. But it still is suggested that everybody that would like to participate, please put in an application. The funding covers a broad array of cybersecurity solutions. As a pilot program, it's trying to provide an immense amount of flexibility to include all reasonable requests for cybersecurity solutions. The Form 484, which we will discuss a bit later, does also give applicants the opportunity to kind of state their case as to why certain solutions or resources would be beneficial to them and the cybersecurity impact that those resources and solutions can have for their school or for their library. Um, as of right now, the contribution for each individual applicant is going to be based on the Cat 1 discount rates. Whether or not that changes or there's further clarification provided to this, because we have seen some things. I think from the FCC, there was a question as to whether or not this would be the final and official determination of how discount rates would be applied. As of right now, this is the best data that we have so far. The funding that's provided for individual schools is $13.60 per student. It's going to be a $15,000 minimum allocation, regardless of the total number of students that are at a particular school if they do not meet the threshold of $15,000. So that's roughly, I think, 1,100 students required to meet that $15,000 minimum allocation. If your school does not have at least 1,100 students, your minimum would still be $15,000. The maximum will be $1.5 million over 3 years, even if your total number of students, based on a calculation of your students times $13.60, exceeds that 1.5 million. So 15,000 is your minimum, regardless of student size, and 1.5 million is your maximum, regardless of student size. Every other school or school district that falls within that range will be based again purely on the total number of students you have. But any schools that are below that minimum and any schools that are over that maximum will be capped to that minimum and maximum of $15,000 to 1.5 million. For libraries, we have $15,000 that's provided per library. So, of course, if you're only one library, you're going to have $15,000. But if you're larger than that, or you have more libraries exceeding that $15,000, your max is going to be $175,000 cap over 3 years. For priorities, as we discussed, this FCC program is something that has been in the works for quite some time. I would say I started working with E-rate just a couple of years ago, 5 years. This is, of course, about a 30-year program. But since 2019, we have seen greater calls for the inclusion of cybersecurity resources as an E-rate eligible item. DDoS protection, EDR resources, an expansion on the different array of modules or services or add-ons that can be included with firewall resources. Those have generally been declined over the last few years. So this program has really been in the works for quite a while based on the previous requests that have come over the past few years. Chairperson Rosenworcel, since she has taken over, has made this sort of her mission within that role that she has in trying to identify ways and opportunities to make cybersecurity resources an available, eligible resource within the greater USAC E-rate world. So, with that being said, looking at what some of the things that Chairperson Rosenworcel has said, what has come out in some of the documentation, we see that the FCC is going to prioritize a somewhat unstated criteria as it relates to entity type, size, or location. They've been sort of vague in saying that they just want to have the greatest diversity possible as it relates to the different types of entities in order to try to determine kind of what is the greatest impact. As of right now, in my opinion, that seems kind of vague because they're constantly talking about trying to prioritize the neediest, trying to have the greatest diversity of different types of entities between rural and urban, large and small, and all these different things. As of today, it does seem that there is a certain priority on certain types of entities, but as to what that is, we have not been given much guidance other than the neediest eligible schools, libraries, and consortia who will benefit the most from cybersecurity funding. And of course, that's going to be based on the highest discount rate. As many eligible schools, trying to provide for as many eligible schools, libraries, and consortia as possible. Those schools, libraries, and consortia that are tribal entities, and then creating a mix of large and small, urban and rural schools, libraries, and consortia. So the hints that have been given in some of the webinar sessions have, again, spoken to something that is being unstated here, but as far as what has been provided to us by the FCC, the priority is to give, I guess, this kind of broad, somewhat abstract definition of the greatest mix and most diverse array of applicants and entities across the K-12 and library landscape as possible. From Chairperson Rosenworcel, she stated the FCC's goal with this program is to use this effort, modeled after our earlier and successful Connected Care pilot program, to study and better understand what equipment, services, and tools will help protect school and library broadband networks from cyber threats. One of the big components of this cybersecurity pilot program is data gathering. So there's a statement that's provided, and we can show that a bit later. There's a statement that any data that's provided through the application process is going to be kept confidential. That means that it's not going to be made public. However, it will be used within the internal FCC data analytics process, program assessment process, and trying to determine what are the biggest cybersecurity needs that we're seeing from applicants, what are the cost allocations or dollar amounts for solutions on average, looking at the types of entities or maybe the geographical locations of entities that have the greatest needs on average. This is really a data gathering mission through this first 3 year program to determine what a cybersecurity initiative is going to look like or needs to look like in order to create the biggest impact. So I think that's also part of why the language around what the criteria is or who the target groups might be is kind of vague, because even if you are not awarded, you're still going to be a valuable part of the FCC's mission to determine what is it that is going to be moving the needle for the next few years for our schools and libraries in regard to cybersecurity resources and cybersecurity support. Given the limited funding, and this is the FCC fully acknowledges the 200 million is not going to cover every single school, library, consortia, school district entity across the country. Given limited funding for the pilot program and the FCC's objective to select as many participants as possible, schools and libraries may apply and participate only once as an individual school or library participant or as part of a consortia. The FCC is encouraging consortia to apply with the most weight given to the most diverse consortia, again, trying to highlight kind of that abstract definition of mixture, diversity, broad array, just be as trying to hit as many places and as many different types of entities as possible. Again, I think that is to further encourage as many applicants as possible to apply to then get as much data as possible throughout this pilot program. The FCC again states that it will prioritize the neediest applicants based on discount rates. The FCC is currently seeking to build a mix of applicant types across the country to ensure that the pilot gathers as much data as possible for guidance going forward. So again, it seems like really the value of this program from the FCC perspective isn't even the awards that will be provided to the winning applicants. It's really the process of determining what needs to be done going forward based on, if anything, you could say this is kind of a $200 million nationwide survey of schools and libraries as to what cybersecurity should look like from the FCC perspective, or cybersecurity support should look like from the FCC perspective. So we've included a link here. It's the FCC's eligible services list. It's a pretty long list, which is good because, as I said, it's a very, very broad definition or a broad array of solutions that are included as eligible items. Some of those items include endpoint protection, identity protection, as well as services. We continue to see training included as something that may be eligible. That's something that's been discussed in the webinars. When you look for it within the eligible services list, you'll also see some reference to training as well for staff. But then there are also comments throughout the full report provided by the FCC that make sure to highlight, staff is generally not included in this. Training is something that should be included in your applications and your responses regarding funding. So I would like to get a little bit more clarification on training and awareness training to staff before I would say that training to staff is going to be something that is going to be guaranteed to be eligible. Firewalls are also an eligible item, but the FCC with this pilot program has made sure to state that nothing that has received funding from E-rate and nothing that would generally receive funding from E-rate is going to be eligible. So when we're looking at what items are E-rate eligible under firewalls, generally it's the firewall itself, and then not being able to do any type of redundancy. Of course, with E-rate, you cannot have, purchase two firewalls for one location using your E-rate dollars. One firewall can be funded through E-rate. The next firewall would have to be funded out of your budget if you wanted to do an HA redundant type of setup regarding your firewalls. You also have certain resources that may not be funded within E-rate Cat 2 for your firewall. When we look at certain things like your content filtering, that would generally be a Cat 1. If you're going to do that through your firewalls, that would have to be outside of Cat 2. So with this program, if that was something that had a cybersecurity benefit, you'll have to state your case. You're not just going to be able to say, we want this, we didn't pay for it through E-rate before, so it should be eligible. You have to state your case as to how that fits into hardening, improving, or upgrading your current cybersecurity posture. I think as of right now, particularly with this program being new and wanting to focus on what are the best odds of getting your application funded, I would avoid looking at adding or layering on anything around your firewalls. There is again ambiguity about what are the specific elements of your firewall support that would be eligible under the FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program, and it specifically stated that anything that has previously received funding from the E-rate program will also not be eligible for funding for the FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program. So it just makes the most sense if you have your firewalls and if there isn't a glaring need for additional services or support on your firewalls, I would avoid trying to fit that into the FCC cybersecurity pilot program. Focus on other resources, whether that's DDoS, endpoint protection, VPN resources. If you need penetration tests, policy support services, anything like that. Again, we'll make this resource available, this link available. This is on the FCC's website. So if you wanted to, you could Google for it, but we'll provide the link so you don't have to worry about that. This list is again pretty expansive. I think they've also hinted that it's not going to be exhaustive. So again, as you're doing your application, and you can include or illustrate how the different programs, solutions, services you're looking for help to improve, harden, or upgrade your current cybersecurity posture and your current cybersecurity offering to your district, to your school, to your library system. Those are the things that I think they're going to want to see as well. And again, from a data gathering perspective, if people are filling in similar items, requests, or services that have not specifically been stated or included by the FCC. That is something that I think will be looked at as well, because again, this is a data gathering process for them. So who's eligible? Entities that are eligible to participate in the E-rate program are also eligible to apply for the pilot program, which includes schools, libraries, consortia. They do not need to do any different or special application to be eligible to apply. Those who have never used E-rate before are also eligible to apply. It is not a requirement that you've, done a previous round of E-rate funding, used up all of your E-rate funding, anything like that. Just generally, those that have been eligible to apply for E-rate funding will also be eligible to apply for the FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program. And again, it states receipt of funding in previous E-rate years does not prohibit you from applying or increase your odds of being funded. So this is some of the stuff that we see as being similar, and some of the things, or this areas where we see some things being similar and some things being a little bit different between E-rate and this pilot program. So you're still going to be relying on your 470 as far as putting out your competitive bid. You're still going to request your services through a 471, and you're still going to be using your same E-rate portal, the same USAC resources in order to request the funding, request the services to process those bid awards, and to track what you're doing throughout this process, particularly as it relates to compliance and invoicing and billing. The difference we see here is going to be Form 484, which we've referenced multiple times here. There are going to be, I believe, one or two more webinars from the FCC specifically talking about Form 484, providing templates, sample responses, guidance as to what it is they're looking for and what they expect. This form is new, so a lot of what we're going to be discussing today about how to prepare for this application is really what are the things that we've been told so far about Form 484, and what are the things that we're hoping for or expecting as it pertains to completing Form 484. So the pilot program application process is going to be the Form 484. It's going to open in the fall. We do not have a set date yet or a deadline yet for when it will open and when it will close. This is going to be part of the largest part of the evaluation process. The FCC is looking for you to have goals and objectives as far as what it is you're hoping to get out of this pilot program. They want you to be able to identify the risks that this can help to address. They want you to be able to determine your cybersecurity experience and expertise, either that you have internally or that you hope to bring in through the various services or solutions that you will be leveraging. You'll need to identify a designated cybersecurity officer or senior staff member. And then you'll also want to be able to have a catalog of services and equipment that you would like to have purchased. And this says in the right corner, available for public use. This is taken directly from a previous FCC webinar event where they allowed us to copy some of the materials that they provided to us. So with this Form 44, this is where you're going to lay out what it is where you are at today from a cybersecurity perspective, what you hope to get from the pilot program, and also where you hope to be at after the pilot program is completed. I would not suggest trying to build a 5 or a 10-year roadmap and including that within your narrative for the Form 484. I would focus it on, in the year after, the 3-year, or as we go through this 3-year process, this is where we intend these resources, these services, this funding to take us, or the position that we intend for it to put us in. Some of the things that have been suggested as it relates to Form 484 is identifying either through some type of remediation event, security assessment or audit, or some type of vendor notes or guidance, but being able to say, this is where we're at today. You want to have somebody who is going to be that senior security professional that would be the contact person that would also complete this form, that would have the knowledge, experience, and expertise, not just with these resources generally, but also with where you are at today as an applicant, as your individual applicant, and knows those things intimately for you. Um, so you're being asked to provide your contact resource, again, that cybersecurity expert for for you as an applicant. Be able to discuss your cybersecurity posture, your current risk management practices, or what your concerns might be from that perspective. Provide any information about any recent unauthorized access or cybersecurity incidents that you might have experienced. Provide information about specific types of cybersecurity services and equipment to be purchased through this program. And then you'll also want to be able to effectively outline and explain how the entities plan to collect data, how you plan to collect data, and then track your cybersecurity progress if you are selected as a pilot participant. So again, I think I kind of made the joke that, this is a $200 million survey. The data gathering process that the FCC is going through, they want you to be an active part of that. So through this Form 484, as far as providing that data, what it is you want, where you're at today, what you think is your greatest need, and then what is the cost for you as an entity, whether you're a small entity or a large entity, what does it cost for you to try to get yourself into a better position? But then also for those applicants that do become pilot program participants, they're going to want to see, are these funds actually being applied in the way that it needs to? Are we seeing an actual improvement in cybersecurity preparedness, cyber event prevention, identification of resources that are doing the job of helping to keep you, your network, and the work you do day to day online safe and secure, effectively keeping educational resources readily available in spite of all of the different attacks that you might face as a school or as a library. Remember to include your solution costs. Also include if there are certain components that are ineligible, but that are still kind of an ancillary or relevant service. And of course, how you're going to fund those things. How are you going to fund your contribution? How are you going to pay for the items that are ineligible? That's all well and good to say that, we are allocated $100,000. Our contribution should be 10,000. You discuss what you'll do with the 100,000. You don't highlight that there's a $10,000 contribution. So really what you should be getting is 110,000, and you should be basing it off of that 110,000. And also being able to state, we have the 10,000 available in our budget to be able to cover that cost. So this is really, it's really going to be it's a very new process, but there's also going to be a lot of detail that needs to be included in this, which I believe is why the FCC is going to have more and more training events coming up to make sure that all of those little things don't get overlooked so that everybody is aware of what is being expected going forward. So this Form 84 is also going to be split into two parts. So you're going to have the initial application, and then I wouldn't say the award, but the selected entities that would be the prime candidates to be included as participants will then be a part of the part two. So the first part will be to collect more general level cybersecurity information about the applicants and proposed pilot projects. Um, Most of it will be pre-populated data, a lot of less yes/no answers, pre-drop-down resources. So not a whole bunch of attachments and data collection and things like that, but there still will be some components that you will have to complete and fill in. The second part is going to be more detailed, and this is going to be for those that are being included or expected to be program participants. They should be able to provide more detailed data, be able to provide their metrics, determine how closely they are getting to meeting those metrics, if they're in alignment with the goals that they have, if they're on track to meet their goals, or if they're not. And if they're not, what is the reason? What is the cause for that? So as I mentioned earlier, all data and responses will be treated as confidential, but the FCC is using this as a massive nationwide data gathering event. So far, are there any questions? I'm not sure if I've seen anything come into the chat yet. No. So we don't have anything in the chat yet. If anybody has questions, please feel free to stop me. So for personnel notes, as we discussed, the cybersecurity knowledge of you as an applicant, whoever has that knowledge to be able to answer those questions, to be able to answer those questions quickly and honestly, that's the person that you're going to want to have in charge of the Form 484. So that person is going to need to have an understanding of your current cybersecurity landscape, knowledge and understanding, of course, of previous events, experiences that you've had from a cybersecurity perspective, but also how is the requested funding or the proposed solution going to fit into your overall cybersecurity strategy? How does this help you to better understand or better secure your current cybersecurity landscape? How does this add to or improve your current cybersecurity offering as a school, as a district, as a library, or as a consortium? What is it that this funding and the solution that's going to be provided through this, how is this going to help you to be in a better place in year 3 or at the end of year 3 compared to where you're at before year 1? It has been suggested that applicants complete preliminary security reviews to use as references in upcoming applications. I think the big thing with this is that the FCC is trying to make sure that folks are not just throwing darts at a board, just taking popular cybersecurity resource and saying, well, we want this, we don't have it yet, we'd like to get it. The things that you include within your application need to be things that you have clearly identified as having a tangible value and a significant impact on you as an applicant in consideration of where you are today. So if you don't have endpoint resources, an EDR solution, and you want an EDR solution, you have to be able to justify what value that EDR solution is going to bring to you as an entity. How is it going to improve your visibility? How is it going to improve your ability to respond to potential cyber events or cyber threats? What guidance have you received that tells you that that is the right type of resource for you to be using? And also, is there anything else that is more valuable? Is that the most critical resource that you need to add to your cybersecurity landscape as an entity? So those are the things to take into consideration. Again, you don't just want to make a suggestion and hope you get awarded. You want to be able to justify that suggestion and identify what the impact is going to be and why this is going to be so impactful for you. Some of the things that you can do are to reference federal, state, or vendor partner guidance. Of course, you have the CISA resources that were passed down in 2021. There are quite a few resources, and they've continued to evolve that over time. CISA has a whole host of K-12 guidance, best practices, recommendations. You also have Department of Homeland Security that does penetration tests and vulnerability assessments for public entities, particularly for any entity that is a member of CIS. So if you're a CIS member and you need to have a security test done, a pen test done, you can apply to receive free resources, free security assessment resources through them. There can be occasionally a wait, so you want to make sure you put in that request very early. You don't want to wait, for the week before or a couple of weeks before this application window ends up opening, especially because we don't know exactly when this window will open. We want to make sure that we get as much information as we can. Also, if you're using certain firewall resources, certain manufacturer firewalls, some manufacturers have really, really robust reporting that can provide you with a very, very reliable network landscape assessment and network security assessment, particularly when you're looking at those resources made available through your firewalls, or if you're using certain resources like you have your endpoint resources. Some of those resources can provide you with really, really great analytics around performance, number of attacks stopped, where the attacks are coming from, style of attacks. So depending on the cybersecurity resources you have in place or the network security resources that you currently have in place, you may also have vendor or manufacturer resources that you can leverage to be able to get a really strong lay of the land and also to be able to understand or determine what types of resources might be needed to make cybersecurity improvements over time, particularly with this program. And again, as I mentioned, all solutions should be roadmapped within the 3-year window for both impact and alignment with the goals of the pilot program. So again, A 5-year plan is great just from an operational perspective, but for the purpose of this pilot program, we're not talking about a 5-year pilot, we're talking about a 3-year pilot. So try to make sure that you're road mapping and targeting most specifically what you plan to do within that 3-year window, how you expect the solution to provide you with value or improvements over that 3-year time frame. This is a sample from CISA of guidance to K-12 as far as resources and solutions that are valuable to include. So when we're talking about where are we at today from our current cybersecurity landscape, what are the things that we can do to improve to get in closer alignment with NIST frameworks, CISA guidance, vendor or manufacturer guidance, particularly, if we use Extreme, Fortinet, or Cisco. If we're using Extreme, Fortinet, or Cisco, what is the guidance that's being provided to us as far as the types of resources that we have available to us that we are currently using, that we should be using? What are the different add-ons or additions that we should be concerned about because we do not have them in place? Leveraging those things that you're already using or that are available at no cost just makes a lot of sense. If you have the opportunity to have your own, private penetration test done, then that's great too. But just from a time perspective and a cost perspective, whatever you already have and whatever's available to you at no cost, try to leverage that as much as you can and see if it's giving you the data that you're looking for. See if it's giving you anything that you don't already know about or that you're not already aware of. Again, when you look at like a sample of CISA recommendations, implementing multi-factor, we're aware of those. Patch management, trying to minimize attack exposure. Developing and exercising your cyber incident response plans, creating training and awareness campaigns. So from that perspective, it's kind of low level, but if you're including, a multi-factor solution and a VPN solution, you can say, we don't have a multi-factor solution in place. We would use our funding to purchase a multi-factor solution, which is a best practice from both CISA, our cyber insurance provider, and as well as NIST guidance. It's one of the first lines of defense that you can have in addition to your actual network security resources. It can help us to catch unauthorized individuals that may have compromised or stolen credentials. And it's also something that covers a lot of bases for us, both on the hardware side and software and platform side. There are a variety of things that you can leverage that are not necessarily high cost or high level security resources. But if you don't have them, and especially if you're going to align them to some of the recommended guidance that's out there, that's kind of the way that we want to start looking at and preparing what our narrative and what our application can be. And we'll also include this. Funds for Learning was probably one of the first groups to put out guidance and webinar based on some of their intimate experience and work that they did with the FCC on this program. Fortinet has an upcoming K-12 FCC Cybersecurity Pilot Program planning event. I believe that's coming in August, mid to late August. You also have FCC contacts Tiffany Purvis, as well as their main or group inbox, the cyber pilot at fcc.gov. We've also, and I think most other people have signed up to receive the webinar notices, newsletter updates, just to make sure that they're staying on top of everything that's coming out. There's a lot of information that's coming. I want to say I've been a part of or sat in on at least 3 different FCC webinars, 2 or 3 of them, plus different private entities like Funds for Learning and different manufacturers that have also been doing theirs. I think it's good to be a part of as many as possible because we're all trying to gather as much information as possible, not just from the FCC, but also best practices based on how we're planning to get ready for the application. Taking the guidance of some other folks who might be in a similar position or who are helping their customers to get ready and to get ready for their application process. We want to try to limit newness as much as possible because newness creates stress, because newness means we have to build everything from the ground up. We want to take what's already been done. We want to take what's already working. We want to take the good ideas that we're finding from others and try to apply it to ourselves so we can try to cut down on some of the heavy lifting that we have to do. And of course, if you need anything from us, please feel free to contact me or your DOF Creations rep that you've been working with. We'll do our best to answer any questions that we have that you send our way. And if we don't have the answer yet, we'll just make sure to keep that within our list of questions and issues that have to be addressed as we continue to go to these next and future webinar events. Based on some of the things that we covered today, I guess what are the big questions that anybody might have left? I think I saw Terry ask, is there a link to the slide deck? Yes. Your individual rep will make sure to provide you with a link to the slide deck, and we'll also have a link to the recording as well.
A quick question.
Yes.
So for like vendors, if we apply and we get approved, we need to purchase from a list of approved vendors, correct? Like for firewall, for example.
No, that'll depend on your state. So you have like an MSA, Master Services Agreement. If your state requires that you follow that process, then yes, you will. If your state does not require that you follow that process, then no, you would not. Again, you'd follow your standard E-rate procedures. So if you've traditionally had to follow that Master Services Agreement where you can only purchase from a certain set of vendors through the E-rate process, and that's how that's worked, then you will have to follow that here. If you haven't had to do that before, then no, you wouldn't.
That helps.
Okay. I'll just let everybody see if they have any more questions left. But if not, we'll be very frank. There's still a lot of information that's coming out about this program. They've given us kind of an entire season of the fall is when this application can drop. And I think that's done on purpose to give the FCC as much time as possible to determine maybe what questions they have left, if they want to make any changes to this before it's officially released. Also, if there are larger industry partners or relationships that they have where folks are maybe bringing concerns to them to try to get those addressed during that time. Fall can be anywhere from September to November, so it's possible that this comes out in November. It's also possible that it comes out in September. Well, everyone, if there is nothing left today, we will make sure that the slide deck as well as the recording is made available to everybody. And of course, if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at the DOF team, and we'll do our best to get your question answered as soon as possible. Thank you, everyone.